It's been quite a while since VOR was introduced on the aviation scene, and although GPS is the new kid on the block, VOR will remain a prime player for IFR navigation for a number of years to come. It's especially significant since almost every airway in the lower 48 states is defined by VORs, and there are literally hundreds of stations distributed throughout the country. VOR's long suit is, and always has been, ease of use. Tune and identify the station, select the course, and then fly to the needle. It works pretty much the same with any VOR receiver in any airplane. But there are ways you can confuse yourself using VOR, and I certainly have done it. So let's review the VOR basics and pitfalls that you'll want to avoid. Now, as you know, a VOR transmits unique courses or radials all around it. And assuming you're within range of 2 VORs, if you find out which radial you're on from each station and draw a line extending those radials to where they intersect, you will discover exactly where you are. To read those radials, you just turn the omni-bearing selector, the OBS, until the needle is centered and you have a from indication in the little box right there. Now the needle will also center with a to indication down here, but since radials by definition are from a VOR, it's simpler to read the radial directly by setting the OBS so that the from is showing. By the way, be a little patient when you're twisting that OBS knob. Remember that the needle will only be off the peg when it's within 10 degrees either side of the radial you're on, both to and from. So that for 320 of the 360 degrees, that needle won't move. See how it's pegged? Now it's within 10 degrees and it moves. A CDI needle behaves like a lot of us. Hey, it doesn't just jump immediately out of bed when the alarm goes off. Now, I'm a little different. I get up before my alarm because I love coming here to the studio to work with my friends. So you could twist right through the 20 degrees where it would be awake and miss it completely if you twist that knob too quickly. Now, here's a tip on how to know which is the shortest direction to turn the OBS knob for centering the needle. If you have a 2 in the window, this ambiguity indicator, turn the knob away from the side that the needle's on. That would be counterclockwise for a right deflection and clockwise for a left deflection. And if the from is showing, turn the knob toward the needle. As you know, when you see an airway on a chart, it's defined by a radial from a VOR. Now, this can be confusing because you don't always fly from a VOR. About half the time you want to fly to it. So let's see how that works. For example, let's say that you're using the VOR to track Victor 269 right here from the Burley VOR DME down here and going northeast to the Pocatello Vortac up here in southern Idaho. And you can see that the course from Burley, and we know this is Burley because to me this looked like a Burley VOR right here, is on the 054 radial. Now you'll always want to set the OBS so it agrees with the direction you're going. And by that I mean toward or away from the VOR. In this case, 054 degrees is away from Burley, or as I like to call it, Burley. So, if you set your OBS to 054 and you're headed northeast from Burley, your direction heading northeast, and your OBS setting 054 agree. And a from in the ambiguity indicator corresponds as well. That way, your CDI needle gives you correct sensing, or what we think of as normal indications. If you were off course slightly to the north, meaning you were left of course, your needle would be displaced to the right, the direction you would turn to get back on course. Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? But for some reason, suppose you needed to reverse course and track Victor 269er back to Burley. After you reverse course, this is what you would still see on your indicator, assuming that you were still off course to the north and had not reset your OBS. It's still 054. Well, your OBS doesn't know what direction the airplane is heading. So its sensing is still set up for tracking the radio away from Burley. Your needle would still be telling you to correct to the right. And that would take you even further away from the radio and Victor 269. Your indications, the left-right needle and the to from flag, won't make any sense. They'll be the opposite of what you expect. This is what is called reverse sensing, because when you fly toward the needle, you'll actually get further away from your intended course. In order for your VOR to make sense, the OBS setting has to agree with the direction you're flying, not necessarily with the radio listed on the chart. So, if you're flying to a VOR on a radio, remember to rotate your OBS to the reciprocal of the radial setting, and in this case, that would be 234. Now let's assume you want to fly to Pocatello and you're continuing northeast on Victor 269. Since this section of Victor 269 does not have a bend or one of those changeover Z marks, you'll switch to Pocatello at the halfway point, about 28 miles from Burley. Now checking the chart, you see that Victor 269 goes into the Pocatello VOR at the 235 radial. That's from the southwest. So, do you set 235 in your OBS? No, because you're still heading northeast, and your heading must agree with your OBS to give you correct sensing. You want to dial in the reciprocal of 235 into your OBS, and that is 055, and that's your course to the station. Now here's an easy way to quickly figure reciprocals. If the number is greater than 180, you will first add 20 and then subtract 200. If the number is less than 180, you will add 200 and then subtract 20. In this case, it's 235 plus 20 equals 255, and then 255 minus 200 equals 055. And as you remember, you'll often see a slight change in your course on an airway when you switch from one VOR to another, just like you have here, from 054 degrees to 055 degrees. Now, beside tracking airways, you might also use your VOR when ATC asks you to report over an intersection. You can locate most intersections with a cross radio from a VOR station off to the side of the airway. For example, suppose you are northeast bound from Akron Vortac here in Colorado on Victor 80, and you are asked to report over Holyoke intersection. Well, you would tune Akron in your number one nav, select 050 on the OBS, and see a from indication while you're tracking Victor 80. Since the 118 radio from Sydney Vortac defines Holyoke on Victor 80, you would tune your number 2 nav to Sydney. The problem is, what do you set in the number 2 OBS? When you actually reach the 118 radio, you'll get a centered needle with the OBS set to 118 and a from flag. Or you could have 29 or 8 and a 2 flag. That would be the reciprocal of 118. For me, I've always preferred to use the from setting, and here's why. If you use the from setting to identify a VOR cross radio, before you get to that radio, the CDI needle will point to the side of the airplane that the VOR is actually on. And when you've passed it, the needle will point away from the side the VOR is on. In this case, with Sydney Vortac to the north, or left of your course, and the OBS on 118, the needle will be to the left of center before you get to Holyoke, and to the right of center after you've passed it. What if you have not quite reached Holyoke, and ATC requests that you tell them your radial from Sydney? Well, you have your number 2 OBS set on 118 with a from, and the needle is 3 dots to the left. You could reach up and center the CDI needle and then just read your OBS directly. But there's another way, one that keeps you from having to reset the OBS. You already know that each dot represents 2 degrees. So 3 dots of deflection are 6 degrees, and that means you are 6 radials south of 118, or on the 124 radial, approximately right here. Now, even though VOR has been around since the 50s, it's still a vital part of your IFR navigation. For me, it's like an old friend, one that I know and trust. You see, VOR is simple and reliable. And those are good things when you're flying around in a cloud.